Everyone thought he'd fail. They said he didn't have what it takes, that he was dreaming too big, that maybe he should settle for something smaller. And after a while, even he started to believe them. He was broke, alone. People stopped returning his calls. Doors that once opened slammed shut. And that voice in his head? It got louder. Maybe they're right. Maybe I've already missed my chance. Maybe I'm just not good enough. He compared himself to everyone else, online, in his circle, in life. Everyone seemed to have direction, purpose, momentum. He was stuck on the sidelines, watching. He had no clear path. No one was cheering him on. Just the quiet question echoing inside him. Why haven't I made it yet? He felt lost, not just in the world, but in himself. Maybe you've been there too, trying, pushing, waiting for something to finally click, still feeling behind. But then, he made a decision. Not a dramatic one, not a loud one, just a shift. He stopped chasing what everyone else said he should want, and started listening to what made him come alive. That's when everything began to change. The same people who laughed, watched in silence. The same ones who doubted started asking how he did it. He didn't just prove them wrong. He proved to himself that he was never broken to begin with. And maybe, just maybe, if he could find his way out, you can too. Because his story isn't just about winning. It's about not giving up when no one else believes, not even you. Everyone thought he'd fail, until he won. But that victory, it didn't come easy. Before the triumph, there was the fall. Everyone gave up on him. His friends stopped calling. Even family, once supportive, began to quietly doubt him. At first, he tried to brush it off. He told himself it was just a rough patch, that things would get better with time. But deep down, he started to wonder, what if they were right? What if he really didn't have what it takes? Maybe you've been where he was, tired, misunderstood, ready to quit. Maybe you felt that same knot in your stomach when the people around you stopped believing. Maybe you've had nights where you lay awake thinking, why haven't I figured it out yet? It didn't start with failure. It started with high hopes. He followed the path everyone said would lead to success. He did what he was supposed to do, worked hard, stayed disciplined, chased the dream. But nothing seemed to click. Every time he thought he was making progress, life pulled the rug out from under him again. It wasn't just one failure. It was a slow unraveling, like trying to climb a mountain with no summit in sight. And in that space between effort and results, doubt started to creep in. He'd scroll through social media and see people his age living the life he wanted. Some were thriving, others were simply lucky. But either way, it made him feel like he was falling behind. He started asking himself the questions that haunt so many people. Why not me? What am I doing wrong? Is it too late? The worst part? It wasn't just about the job he didn't get or the opportunity that slipped away. It was the slow erosion of self-belief. Every rejection made his vision blurrier. Every unanswered message made the silence louder. He began to shrink, not physically, but emotionally. His dreams became smaller. His confidence cracked. And without even noticing, he started to pull away from the world. This was his fall. Not a dramatic collapse, but a quiet unraveling, the kind that happens slowly, silently. Until one day, you look in the mirror and barely recognize who you are anymore. He wasn't just broke financially. He was broken spiritually. Alone with his thoughts, he started believing that maybe his best days were already behind him. Maybe he had missed his shot. And yet, this is the part of the story that matters most. Because the truth is, before any rise, there's always a fall. Before someone becomes someone, they often feel like no one. The pressure, the failures, the comparisons, they don't just test your will, they test your identity. And for him, this was that moment. The moment where everything he believed about himself was challenged. But what makes this story different is that he didn't quit. Not entirely. Even in his darkest moment, when it felt like no one was watching, no one was clapping, and no one cared, something inside him whispered, "Keep going." This isn't the part people usually show. You won't find it in highlight reels or Instagram posts, but it's the most important part of the story, because this was where everything changed, not on the outside, but within. And maybe if you've ever felt like he did, overlooked, doubted, close to giving up, then this story isn't just about him. It's about you too. Because if he could rise from this, maybe you can too. And that rise, it started with a shift, a moment of clarity that changed everything. Something changed, not all at once, but slowly, like a sunrise after the longest night. He didn't wake up with a grand plan. There was no lightning bolt of clarity. It began with small, almost invisible acts. Getting out of bed even when he didn't feel like it. Turning off the noise of the outside world, the opinions, the pressure, the comparisons, and tuning in to the quiet voice within. For the first time in a long time, he asked himself, what do I actually want? Not what would impress others, not what would prove something, but what felt real, what felt true. Because the truth was, he had spent so long chasing the life he thought he was supposed to have. He never asked if it was the life he wanted. He was living for validation, for approval, for applause that never came. And when it didn't, it crushed him. But now he was ready to live for something deeper. That was the shift. He stopped chasing what the world told him to want. He started listening to what made him come alive. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was terrifying. Because it meant letting go of the version of himself that others had built, and rebuilding one that he could believe in. It meant unlearning old beliefs. The ones that said he wasn't good enough, not smart enough, not capable enough. It meant challenging the stories he had been told, and the ones he had told himself. He started small, reading again, journaling, going for walks just to think. He cut out distractions. He distanced himself from people who only called to remind him of who he used to be, never who he could become. And little by little, he began rebuilding. Not just his career, not just his goals, but his self-worth. Maybe you've been there too, on the edge of giving up, but something inside says, try again. Maybe your shift is still waiting for you, just like his was, quiet but powerful, ready to change everything once you listen. Because change doesn't always start with strategy. Sometimes it starts with stillness. He stopped running from the silence and started sitting with it. And in that stillness, he found clarity. Not a 5-year plan, not a guarantee, but the first step. And that was enough. The world hadn't changed. The doubters were still out there. The bank account was still low. But something inside had shifted. He didn't need their approval anymore. He just needed momentum. And with that, he began the climb. There were no cameras rolling, no one cheering from the sidelines, no big announcement saying, he's back. The world remained silent, and that silence was deafening at times. But still, he climbed. Early mornings turned into late nights, not the glamorous kind, not the kind you post about. These were the messy, frustrating, why am I doing this here kind of days? The kind where you give everything you have, and it still doesn't feel like enough. He failed again, and again. But this time, something was different. He didn't take it as proof that he wasn't meant for it. He took it as feedback, as fuel. Because now he wasn't chasing perfection. He was chasing progress. He didn't wait to feel confident. He acted while scared. He showed up when it was inconvenient. He gave his best even when no one was watching, especially when no one was watching. That's the part they never talk about, the unglamorous middle. The in-between where you're not quite losing, but you're definitely not winning either. The stretch of time where your only reward is knowing you didn't quit today. But it was in that invisible space that something powerful happened. He got better. Not overnight, not in big flashy ways, but inch by inch, day by day. The skills improved, the mind sharpened, the inner voice, the one that used to whisper, "You can't," started saying, "Keep going." And slowly, the gap between who he was and who he wanted to be started to close. Still, the outside world stayed quiet. No recognition, no validation. But that didn't stop him. Because he was no longer working for the applause. He was working for the version of himself that he could be proud of. And that version was rising. He built habits. He stayed consistent. He started saying no to distractions, even when they were tempting. He chose the long-term gain over short-term relief. And when the voices of doubt crept back in, because they always do, he didn't silence them. He sat with them, faced them, and kept moving anyway. You see, the climb no one applauds is where the real transformation happens. Not just in what you're building, but in who you're becoming. Maybe you're in that climb right now. Maybe it feels like no one sees you. Like all your effort is going unnoticed. Like nothing is paying off. But it is. You're building something they can't see yet. You're becoming someone they'll eventually respect. Maybe even admire. But more importantly, someone you'll be proud of. And one day when the results start to show, they'll call it sudden success. But you'll know better. You'll know about the climb. And what comes after the climb? The breakthrough. It didn't happen in a big cinematic moment. No spotlight, no fireworks. It started small. A message, a callback, a "Hey, I saw what you've been working on." Then another. The things that once went unnoticed began to catch attention. The seeds planted in silence started to bloom. That first yes came after hundreds of no's, but it only took one. And suddenly, the silence broke. He wasn't chasing validation anymore, but it found him anyway. Opportunities that once felt out of reach started to appear, not because luck struck, but because he'd been preparing in the dark. People called it overnight success, but they hadn't seen the nights he stayed up doubting himself, the days he kept showing up despite rejection. They didn't see the meals skipped to fund a dream, the birthdays missed, the relationships strained. All they saw was the result. They saw the headline, not the struggle, the highlight reel, not the bloopers. But that's how it always goes. And maybe that's how it's supposed to go. Because the breakthrough wasn't about proving others wrong anymore. It was about proving to himself that he was never broken to begin with. He'd stopped trying to arrive and started trying to evolve. And once that shift happened, internally, everything outside began to change too. The breakthrough didn't change who he was. It revealed who he had always been. People began to listen. They asked him to speak, to teach, to lead. The same ones who doubted were now drawing inspiration. But here's what they didn't know. That even in his breakthrough, he still had doubts. Still faced fear. Still questioned if he was good enough. The difference now? He didn't let those thoughts drive the car. He had become someone who could feel fear and keep going anyway. That's the real breakthrough. Not the win, but the wisdom. Not the crowd, but the clarity. The applause came late. But when it came, it was loud. People cheered. Old friends reappeared. Strangers quoted him, followed him, studied him. They called it luck. They said he was just in the right place at the right time. Or, must be nice to have it so easy now. Easy? They didn't see the years it took to become an overnight success. They didn't see him waking up before dawn just to squeeze in a few hours of work before his day job. They didn't see him rehearsing in his car, learning from failures, or sitting alone on weekends while everyone else seemed to be moving ahead in life. No one saw the years he spent invisible, building, breaking, rebuilding. Luck? Luck didn't carry him through the nights where the only voice he heard was the one saying, You're wasting your time. The truth was simple. He just didn't quit. He kept learning. He kept showing up when no one was watching. He kept believing, just enough to try again the next day. That kind of resilience can't be faked. It's not gifted. It's earned. Because what most people don't understand is that the results come after the resistance. You don't get rewarded for starting. You get rewarded for staying. He was the guy they underestimated, the one no one believed in, until he succeeded. Then suddenly, the narrative changed. People said, "I always knew he'd make it." They reposted his words, quoted his interviews, tried to replicate his steps. But the truth is, his steps weren't magic. They were messy. There were moments where he questioned every decision, days where he wanted to give up. He didn't always know what he was doing. He just knew why he couldn't stop. That was the difference. He didn't win because he had a perfect plan. He won because he kept going without one. Because when you show up every day, despite failure, something starts to change. Not just in your life, but in you. And that's when you realize you were never chasing the destination. You were building the strength for the journey. So when people say, "He got lucky," let them. They weren't there. They didn't see the cost. But you were. Because maybe you are where he used to be. Fighting, working, hoping. And if that's the case, then this next part is especially for you. Because the win wasn't the end. The real transformation? It was becoming the kind of person who didn't need anyone else's permission to believe again. Winning wasn't the final chapter. It was a reflection of everything that had already shifted inside him. Because the real victory wasn't the money or the praise or the moment he finally made it. It was the quiet transformation that happened before any of that. He stopped needing validation from people who didn't understand his vision. He stopped chasing goals that were never really his to begin with. He stopped performing for a world that only paid attention when he succeeded. Instead, he started listening to what truly mattered. He realized that success wasn't about being seen. It was about seeing yourself clearly, knowing your worth when no one else does, taking one step forward when everything tells you to turn back. It's not just about proving people wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you were always right to keep going. He became the kind of person who didn't crumble under pressure, but was forged by it. The kind who could stand in silence while others doubted and still move forward. The kind who could fail 10 times and rise 11. Not because it was easy, but because it mattered. And once he changed, everything else followed. The world didn't give him permission to succeed. He gave himself permission to try. That change, that deep internal shift, was the real reward. Because after everything, the rejection, the loneliness, the nights of self-doubt, he emerged different, stronger, calmer, clearer. And more than anything else, he became someone who could help others find their way too. Not by being perfect, but by being proof that you don't have to be perfect to keep going. His story wasn't a fairy tale. It was a slow, painful, honest journey through fear, failure, and eventually, freedom. And now, that journey is a light for someone else. Maybe for you. Because here's the truth. The world doesn't need more people who make it. It needs more people who rise when they're broken, who speak when they're scared, and who love themselves even when they feel unlovable. That's who he became. And maybe, just maybe, that's who you're becoming too. The truth is, this story was never just about him. It's about the quiet strength inside the people the world overlooks. It's about the invisible battles fought in silence, the ones no one claps for. It's about you, because maybe you felt it too. That ache when life doesn't turn out the way you thought it would. The sting of being left behind while others seem to race ahead. The loneliness of knowing you have something to offer, but not knowing how to get there. Maybe you're still in your own version of rock bottom. Maybe the world has moved on, and you're left wondering if your time already passed. But let this be a reminder. You're not done. You're not too late. You're not broken beyond repair. the same light that helped him find his way. It's in you too. And no, the path won't be easy. There'll be setbacks. There'll be silence. There'll be people who don't believe. But none of that has the final word. You do, because your story isn't finished. And if you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or unworthy, just know, that doesn't mean you failed. It means your rise is still coming. This video, this story, isn't just meant to inspire you. It's a mirror, a spark, a challenge, to believe again, to take one more step, to write the next chapter. No matter how dark the page looks now, everyone thought he'd fail, until he won. But the real win was that he never gave up, and maybe today, neither will you.